Hello and welcome to Epicenter. No ambiguity, no noise. Let's come straight to the point. Let me remind you of a time when there was no internet, no 24/7 TV, no breaking news like we understand the phenomenon today, no cell phones. There was one state owned television, and yet news happened and it was reported fearlessly and objectively. Kashmir in 1990 was a war zone. Not that Kashmir has never not been a war zone, but in modern times, Kashmir became a theater of war sometime in 98-90. During this time, very little was objectively reported. In any case, it is very difficult to report from a conflict zone because there are multiple variations of truth. Everybody is playing games. The good guys and the bad guys, everybody is playing games. You don't know who is standing with which team. You don't know who is telling you the truth. There is psychological warfare, wartime propaganda, as you must have heard. That is an effective weapon in a war zone. So, in all this, a journalist has to wade through all this to report. However, even then, a brave and fearless journalist stood up for integrity in journalism and truth. My guest today is that veteran journalist whose reportage from that decade in Kashmir has become a gold standard in journalism. My guest today, Aasha Khosa ji. She's a Delhi-based multimedia journalist working as an editor for Awaz The Voice English portal. She has worked as a journalist for India's leading national newspapers like Indian Express and Business Standard. Ashaji was a Srinagar-based reporter for 10 years, 1989 to 1990, and has objectively covered insurgency, exodus, turmoil in Kashmiri society. She traveled to Pakistan and interviewed many people linked with Kashmir insurgency there. Ashaji has won many awards for her work in Kashmir. She writes on Kashmir, Muslim affairs, environment, and politics of India. Welcome to Epicenter, Ashaji.
Thank you, Sunanda. Thank you so much for such an elaborate and little flattering introduction.
All
Thank
well
you for
deserved.
having me.
All well
Thank you.
deserved. I have to tell you that
Honored.
this is I do this all the time, but this episode today is a fangirl moment for me. I have been aware of your work. We have both been aware of each other's work. However, our paths have crossed on social media, but we've never had a conversation like this. We've never sat down for a long, deep dive into issues. So I'm glad this is happening on Epicenter today. So I want to start from the very beginning. You were, if you remember, 1990 is what everyone remembers, 19th January. But let's go a little, in back in the time. So we know the first terrorist attack was on, if I remember, February of 1988, on then police chief Vatali's house. First time Kalashnikovs were seen in Kashmir. And after that, there was, I think there were a couple of bomb blasts, one on Residency Road and one on Boulevard. And then, of course, we reached 14th September 1989. That is when the targeted killings started, and Pandit Kalal Taplu was shot dead. I want to know, where were you when this was happening? Were you a political journalist already based in Kashmir and reporting from Kashmir? Or were you sent because nobody had inkling of what was going to happen, but did somebody think that something was happening and they sent you there? How did you end up in Kashmir in 1989? Or when did you end up in Kashmir?
Yeah, it was, I think, July or August 1989. I got a posting to Srinagar, and nobody had any clue what is happening. People generally thought that it's some conflict between A minister and B, center and state, Delhi or Kashmir ka jhagda ho raha hai. That was generally the perception in Delhi. But nevertheless, so they told me, "Can you go to Kashmir?" I said, "Yeah, sure." Even I didn't know what I'm getting into. Going back to Kashmir from Delhi, I was working in Delhi, Press Trust of India. So from there, I got an assignment. I went to Kashmir. And nobody, I mean, I would go and meet people. Kya ho raha hai? People will tell me fantastic stories. My cousin will tell me, oh, my friends have gone and got trained in Pakistan. They have Kalashnikovs in their homes. I said, what is he talking about? I mean, nobody was sure, but there was a kind of that feeling that something is happening. But no, government would always say, no, 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 nothing is happening. What is this? This is center ka chal hai. Center will say, no, no, we don't know. This must be, the local politician. They're always not good guys. So there was utter confusion, and people, you go to coffee house. Srinagar's coffee house is very famous. It will be all full of that cigarette ka dhua, and a lot of talk about what is happening. Somebody will say, oh, ye Bhuta Singh ne karaya hai. Bhuta Singh was then, I think, he was the home minister.
Home Minister, yes.
I said, no, no, yes. So that was the common talk. Arey, ye Bhuta Singh ne karaya. But if you met younger people, like I met my cousins, I met my friends, so they would tell me that, har ghar mein ek Kalashnikov hai, har ghar mein grenade hai, and they also didn't know what it will mean to their lives. They thought it's some movie going on, and some macho man will come and he'll do something. Nobody knew the seriousness of the situation, other than perhaps the people who were involved. And they also, I think, they were all romanticizing. Oh, there are guns, there are grenades, and then there, what you refer to, the targeted attacks, the attack on CTO, Central Telegraph Office, all those started. And yet the feeling that it's a full-fledged insurgency, proxy war by a neighboring country waged on India, uh, that feeling never, it never percolated in the system and also among the people. Kuch ho raha hai, kuch hone wala hai. Beyond that, nobody knew anything. Farooq Abdullah was ruling that time, and his escapades we all know. He would not take it seriously. He had a strange idea that it's not my responsibility; it's the responsibility of the center. And also, they didn't take it seriously. I mean, I don't want to blame him all for everything that happened, but he had no clue to what is happening then. He was a chief minister, and when going got tough, he knew that there is something big happening. वो दुम दबा के वहां से भाग गए. He just resigned and put everybody in trouble, including his own party men, and he left. That was 1989 to early 90. This all was happening at that time.
Yeah.
Tikalal Taplu, when he died, I was in Srinagar. Then Rubiya Sayeed was kidnapped, Home Minister's daughter.
Yeah.
That was a turning point. I mean, that time people knew, oh God, it is serious. Kuch bada ho raha hai, and we are clueless. And but the reaction of the people was still very romantic. People were, when Rubiya Sayeed was released in exchange for 5 terrorists who later proved to be lethal for India. We all know that story. Then probably people thought, अरे ये कुछ बड़ा होने जा रहा है. Even then, Kashmiri Muslim people, they didn't understand that it will boomerang on them. They were singing songs that time. One hota hai na, one. All on the roadside, people are singing songs, massive processions. Oh, something. It was something of a victory. What victory? Whose victory? People didn't understand. I asked women. I was going from that day. I remember I was going from Amira Kadal to Ali Kadal, where I was staying with my aunt. So I would ask, kya ho raha hai ye? People had no clue. They were all singing song, Ghazi aa gaya. And uske baad jo hua, they couldn't imagine that their own people will die. All these youth whom they are calling Ghazi today, they will face a lot of terrible times. They'll get into their graves early, most of them. Nobody had any clue. I think everybody was romanticizing with the idea that कुछ हो रहा है, बंदूक आ गया है, ट्रेनिंग पे गए हैं लोग. That was a very common phrase. किसी को पूछो कि आपका बच्चा कहाँ है, they'll say it's to go with training.
He's
It
gone
was
free.
training, which meant that he has gone to terrorist camps and he's getting trained to be a terrorist. And
Yeah.
people thought that is normal. See, that was the state of mind of people that time.
Yeah. No, indeed. I was in Kashmir too at that time, so I remember I was very young, but I do remember that my mother used to talk to our neighbors, and there was this house right next to us, and they used to sell milk. and they were Kashmiri Muslims. And I remember my mom used to talk to them, and she would often ask them that, "Where is your son?" He was young, I guess a little older than me, and must have been 15 or 16 years old that time. And they would say that he has gone for training, which was like a common word. So she came back, and what does training mean to a Kashmiri Pandit woman? Still does. She thought he has gone for an engineering training. So she was very happy. She thought,
True.
look at this, their boy has gone for an engineering training. This is so wonderful. And she used to think that everyone has gone for. So I remember the word training very well, because
Very
everybody
well.
between the age of 15 and 21, everybody seemed to have gone for training. So, but I want to ask you this question. If we as ordinary people, and you as a journalist, you heard all these stories about people, about young people are disappearing. I mean, we knew it, we could see it. Our neighbors were disappearing. Where was the intelligence? What were they doing? I understand the state government was incompetent. I understand that Indian government at that time, the central government, was very weak. We were going through, multiple governments, and it was a weak time for Indian state,
Yes.
even at federal time, even at central. But what were our intelligence agencies doing? Did they not see that young men are disappearing?
Sunanda, actually, it was not a secret. It was an open thing that
Yes.
young people are going in buses. I
Mm.
mean, there is a bus stand outside, but Malu bus stand.
Mm.
There, they would they'll say apor kapor apor
Kapoor,
apor.
Kapoor, Hadwar, Kapoor, Kapoor.
Atbor. It
Fara,
was
Fara.
the buses were going from Srinagar to Kupwara, taking all these young men who were going for training. Training was that they would go and join the militant camps, terrorist camp. They'll get trained to become terrorists, and people were going in hordes, and
Mm,
it didn't require any high end intelligence. Everybody, it was an open secret, and yet the government didn't take it seriously, had no counter strategy, and practically nobody did anything about it.
mm,
And now people who were in charge, Farooq Abdullah in the state, and somebody in the center, I mean, they just looked at each other and said, "Kya karna hai?" And still, I think there was a level of what mistrust between the center and state, which had always been there. It was manufactured, and it was kind of that is a separate story. But they both were eyeing each other. Oh, he ye badmashi kar raha hoga. Delhi will say, "Oh, it's Farooq Abdullah who's not a good fellow, who's not doing well." So overall, there was nobody was taking charge of Kashmir. See, intelligence people, they are very bright. They write everything on the record. अगर आप उस समय का इंटेलिजेंस रिपोर्ट्स देखोगे, I'm sure everything is written there. But it is the politician, it's the system, it is the leaders who have to act. The leaders were in the, again, they were in a very romantic era. Point is that the politicians in Delhi, they were thinking, oh, Pakistan छोटा सा मुल्क है, क्या कर पाएगा? The Delhi, and not Srinagar, but Delhi was in the under the spell of India having won the 71 war.
mm,
Abhi kya karega? We have broken them. What will they do? They are little badmash, but they cannot do much to us. So Delhi had that. It must be local guys. We'll sort them out. So Delhi was not serious till Rubiya Sayeed happened. The
mm,
day Rubiya Sayeed happened, and then there were terrorist exchange for them. Then the thing dawned on Delhi that this is something serious is brewing, and all the reports that had been sent by the intelligence, they are not cock and bull stories. These are true people who are going abroad, and they can pose trouble.
mm,
After that, I think paramilitary forces were sent in
mm,
large numbers, and some kind of control they started taking, and it was very, very, very difficult. Those were very turbulent times. I mean, the our security forces, they're not trained to fight terrorism in built up areas. We had the expertise to fight terrorism in jungle areas, guerrilla warfare, but not in the urban areas where everything was embedded. It was an embedded militancy. I mean, घर में बंदा बैठा है, he had Kalashnikov, he has stocked everything at home, and then he'll just go fire at 2 3 people, come back. So going, and we all know downtown Srinagar is so you kind of very thickly populated. There are barely lanes in which one person can pass at a time. You have to go and fight there. There were a lot of casualties. There were a lot of mistakes made. There were a lot of bad encounters. There gav kadal happened. A lot of things happened. It was not a smooth functioning, and our security forces also, they had to get a foothold. It took time, and those were the most turbulent times in Kashmir. And I will say a lot of casualties also happened at that time,
Yeah.
and I happened to be there.
Yeah. What was the first big story you covered? What was the first big story that made national, international headlines? What was that first story? Was it Rubiya Sayeed?
Well, I first did the first. My first story was that how a big cache of Kalashnikovs was unearthed in somewhere in Kupwara. I
Mm.
mean, that was something which, when the SP was briefing me, this happened, and I thought, what is he talking about? How can there be so many Kalashnikovs in one place and so many grenades? And people thought he apna number banane ki koshish kar raha hai, he's bullying you. I said, what is he up to? But he was a very nice, decent person. He went up in his life, Mr. Amin Shah. And people are thinking that, he must have been briefed. It must be a stockpile dumped by somebody to blame somebody. Those are all typical conspiracy theories which go on in Kashmir. So that was, as a young reporter, I was very excited. And then I came back from Kupwara and said, oh, I have a big story. How he caught it. And people said, are you're trusting them? This is all Milli Bhagat. This is not truth. So that was first time I felt, oh, there are limitations of my reporting. I'll
Mm.
have to be careful, because it is not what you see and what you hear. There is more the layers to it. And but of course, Rubiya Sayeed was a big, big story, which we were all covering. I remember day and night we'll be going to control room, we'll be going to Rubiya Sayeed's house, and more importantly, we were covering what was happening on the roads. My God, that was, I just described one scene after she was kind of she came out of the
He was
clutches of her
briefed.
abductors.
Mm.
So there was a in Lal Chowk. I think it must be some 4-5 lakh people. Actually, they were. I was looking from a window in a hotel where there were journalists, and they were very protective about it because I was the only woman. They said, "No, you cannot go like this." So I was also watching it. There was a bus, and they wanted to put some flags. I think JKLF flags. The bus, it just moved with the flow, with the force of the people there. It was that kind of a scene. And then there was one woman and singing on the roads. It was maddening. That day I really felt a little scared by going to Ali Kadal from Lal Chowk around 9 o'clock or 8 o'clock.
Mm.
Kashmir had never been so scary. That was very, very scary. And that also, when Rubiya Sayeed was kidnapped again, um, conspiracy theories. Oh, she must have got herself kidnapped. It was those all kind of wild theories of floating around. But we could see it's a serious thing. When she came out, she broke down. She met her father. Her father came. We were at their house that time. So it was real. I mean, I could feel it's real. There's no drama in it, and that changed the course of what is turmoil in Kashmir.
Mm.
After that, everybody got into business, and then began the all firing, and things really went
Mufti
out of
Said, of
out
course,
of
Mufti Said had just taken over as Home Minister. And in his book and in his, he has multiple times said that this was, he didn't have to say it, but everyone knows this was the greatest mistake of his life. I mean, he sort of thought his thought process was that of a father and not as a home minister of Republic of India. We all know that conspiracy theories will stay. We don't know in Kashmir. That is one thing. It's all smoke and mirrors. We will never know, who really abducted her, why she
true.
was abducted. Those stories will never be told. But I do remember that when she was released with pashmina shawls. She was released somewhere in downtown, I think, and then pashmina shawls were given to her, and she was as in just a विदाई होती है कहीं से घर से. So she was given gifts and she was given. So it didn't seem like that, abductors were releasing you. But then they had struck a deal with the government of India, and that is when the might of government of India was really challenged. And a weak state came out in. Everyone could see that Indian state had shown its weakness. That was the first time Indian state had sort of crumpled. So I agree that.
But can I add something?
Yeah.
That was not only the point when Indian state became weak and it was seen by the whole world. It started becoming weaker after day by day. After that, the government of India became so defensive in Kashmir. They didn't want to do any experiment, any bold decision. No, no, no. They were really scared to do anything. And the people like us who were reporting and who we would wonder what has happened to the Indian state. I mean, there were Kashmiri Muslim friends who will say, "अब करना क्या है इसका देना है क्या पाकिस्तान को तो please let us know in advance." So that was the state of. After that, the decline of Indian state's control on Kashmir or management of Kashmir, whatever you call it, it started failing, and there was, I mean, it went to pits. I mean, we as journalists there would say, what is happening? What is government of India's plan of action? There were senior policemen who will ask us, what is government of India up to? Are they serious about retaining Kashmir? Things were really bad. The government of India took a lot of time to recover from that shock, and not their standards, their way of dealing in Kashmir started falling. And they had no strategy. I can very well say there was no strategy whatsoever to deal with Kashmir in a very holistic manner. They just bought some CRPF. Pehle CRPF then they got BSF also. And when people start protesting as BSF, they'll reshuffle with them with CRPF. So there was no holistic management of Kashmir. It had to be dealt with, but there was nothing happening that sort. And people like me were very disappointed. This is more scary for us. If there is a government and that's doing its job, it's fine. It can do a bad job. It can do a good job on a given day. But the government was not simply taking job. They were just managing it on day-to-day basis. And that went
as they say,
for a very long time.
They didn't show up. The state government had crumbled, we know, but the central government had also collapsed for a while. Totally collapsed.
Yes, I'm referring to the central government, because after Farooq Abdullah quit, suddenly when Jagmohan came, after that it was center. I'm just referring to the center. And when it's a proxy war, it is the responsibility of the state.
Yeah. So when we say that in early 1990s, Indian state had collapsed in Kashmir, we are not exaggerating. You have seen it with your own eyes. Indian state had truly collapsed, and it took a while for them to get back on their knees. So we've established that. One question that keeps coming up, and we have gone blue in our faces trying to say, those of us who were there also, that no, Jagmohan did not tell any Kashmiri Pandit to leave. I mean, he was not even there in Kashmir on 19th January when all that stuff from mosques happened. You must have been a witness. I was an eyewitness to that too. That all these slogans came from, all these genocidal slogans came from mosques, and nobody knew at that time that it was happening all over the valley. Because wherever you were, you just thought that only you were hearing it. There were no phones or anything to exchange
no
notes
social
and
media,
find
no
out that
social
it's happening
media.
all over Valley. That would have happened much later. Because I remember I was at my mom and I, we had gone to my uncle's, it was my grandfather's birthday. We had gone to their house, and they used to live in Naisar. In Kashmir, right next to Mesuma, if you remember.
Maisuma, yes.
Yeah.
Yes.
So we heard, and I've written about it multiple times. We heard, my mother went out and she heard the slogans. And then we came out, and the little courtyards in old homes that you would cross a courtyard to go into the restroom. And that's when that little courtyard, we all stood there and we heard all those slogans. But we thought only we had been Gero. We thought it was only our mohalla. We didn't know at that time that entire state, it was, coordinated. So when people tell me that Jagmohan coordinated your exodus, I tell them, forget Jagmohan. You tell me, how did you coordinate in pre-WhatsApp era? in pre-social media, how were all these mosques and all this sloganeering, how was this coordinated across
Coordinated.
the village, across the valley? What do you remember of 19th January night?
It was a terrible day, terrible day. Coming, I'll come to that. But before that, I'll tell you. I mean, you said there was. How was it coordinated? How could it be coordinated? It was coordinated at a level that all the mosques all over Kashmir were, there were slogans were coming out of it, and it was that at that level it was coordinated. But among the people who felt scared or who were this was targeted at, there was no coordination. Every individual family took their personal decision to leave or not leave, mostly left. I mean, I know of families where one brother quietly left, not telling the other, because his life was really, maybe he was in police or he was in some sensitive department, and he had been targeted, and he left without telling his family. And after reaching, then somehow they came to know the fellow has gone to Jammu. So it was a terrible time, and that time I also left Kashmir because I was posted there, but I left Kashmir for Jammu. I can tell you the story at the Jammu end. Our house is in Shakti Nagar. Uh,
What time period is this?
it is January, February, March, 90 Exodus. Yeah,
Okay,
90
so January, February, March, you were in
March.
Jammu. You were
I
in
was in
Jammu.
Jammu. My
Okay, so tell us
husband was
that
in,
story.
yeah. So people, I mean, in our house on a given day, there were 5 trucks which came. Our house was not very big. I mean, just a 2-3 bedroom house. I So 3 trucks come. Out of the trucks come our relatives who are distraught with grief, and they can't. All the women are hidden behind in the truck with the luggage. It's not what they showed in Kashmir file is not true, untrue. It
Mm,
happened to people. They'll come out and they'll start crying. Oh, finally, have we reached? Are you sure we have reached Jammu? They were so scared, and everybody, my house was full of luggage of people. There were some were staying till they made, we mutually made some arrangements for them. It was like our lives were devastated. My mother's brother was coming tomorrow, her sister is coming with a, then my father's family is coming, my father's sisters are coming. It was a terrible time. I can tell you, on one given day, I remember I took out 5 kilos of sugar, put in the dabba, in the kitchen, and we had a helper at the home. So in the evening, he says, "Ab chini aur dijiye." I said, "Kya hua? Kahan gaya chini?" He said, "Pata hai kitna chai bana hai?" Kashmiris and chai, how
yeah.
their relationship is. So that was a kind of rush. And we people living in Jammu, I had a house in Jammu, we were distraught. What is happening? Everybody's coming out of Kashmir. What is happening to us? I mean, our lives were disturbed, and we couldn't see our people how they were, coming, and uh, they had left everything there.
Yeah.
Everything they had left in Kashmir, and they had come. Maybe little gold somebody had picked up, and thoda sa kapda leke aa gaye the. And we, some of us, organized among ourselves. Everybody helped each other to just support them, not beyond that. People found jobs, and that's a different story. But Jammu was in turmoil. Jammu was in turmoil. Locals were very helpful. They opened their houses on rentals. I mean, they got good, decent rents. But there was then issue that we'll not give on rent because you Kashmiri Pandits eat mutton. That was a big issue in Jammu. And there are a lot of stories of how children. I remember one of my cousin whose children, he was abducted by terrorists, and somehow he managed to escape, or he was let allowed to go return. But he never tells us the full story. But I can understand what happened to him. His children, then he left Kashmir. He was a policeman. He left Kashmir, and he was without a job for a long time. He wouldn't get even relief. His children suffered malnourishment. I mean, that was the biggest shock of our life. 2 children, young, beautiful, God bless them, they're very well settled now. The children suffered malnourishment. Doctor said, "Inko khana khilaiye, aap acha sa khana khilaiye." And it was a shame for all of us, 2 small kids. So
Yeah.
that all happened in Kashmir,
I want to
Jammu.
ask you two questions. I want to ask you two questions. We know that state collapsed in Valley totally in around that time. We also know now that in right after January 19th, the exodus started. I mean, people started leaving their homes. We know that Jagmohan had not even come to Kashmir on 19th January. He was still in Raj Bhavan in Jammu. He had not even taken over in Valley. So
Right.
Jagmohan did not coordinate. He could not coordinate. Even if he wanted to, he could not coordinate. So it was people leaving on their own volition because they were absolutely scared and frightened for their lives. And as you said in the beginning, कि पता नहीं था हर घर में कलाशनकोव था almost. You didn't know where the gun was. You didn't know who was the terrorist. And it was literally the betrayal in the backyard because when there is such embedded terrorism, then what do? You don't, it's not as if terrorists are coming from somewhere and they're attacking you. You don't know if there's a terrorist sitting in the next house. So when such embedded terrorism happens, you cannot blame the society, you cannot blame the victims for leaving. So we know that. So on Kashmir, and of course the state collapsed. But in Jammu, why did the state collapse in Jammu? I mean, in Jammu, the central government, why were people left to fend on their own? Why did people have to go through the kind of hardships they went through? What was the state doing in Jammu part of it? Why were they not able to handle that either?
No, it happened very suddenly. As I told you, the government of India had not, he had underestimated the situation. They were playing with it. They were thinking, nahi, nahi, ye thoda theek ho jayega kuch dinon mein. The whole impression was that the intelligence at some level had failed. Nobody had this, the understanding of the plan Pakistan had hatched that they will overwhelm the government of India, and government of India obliged them by saying, yes, we are overwhelmed. uh, it was a sign of the weak government, no planning, no vision. That was seen everywhere. That happened in Jammu also. Jammu people are, the natives, they are very kind people. They don't get into this political things. They are very simple people. I also consider myself a Jammuite. I can speak that language. I've been brought up with Jammu people. So they were, at a personal level, they were very cooperative people. आ जाइए हमारे घर में रहिए, अंडा मत खाइए, मीट मत खाइए, but रह सकते हैं. But government was wishing it away that people from Kashmir have come. No, 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 one bus came. No, the other will say, no, no, it's only some people who came. So we have to understand at that time, while we criticize the government, and we should criticize the government, there was no social media, there was no mass media in that sense that there was television or anything. So the government was also equally kind of what, there was an inertia, and there was a weak government in the center who couldn't take decisions. They were wishing it away. I remember the Kashmir Times is, I have worked for Kashmir Times newspaper in Jammu long back, I mean, before that. So I was sitting with the editor that time, and Ved Bhasin ji, very great human being. So I asked him, you show me your paper where it is registered that Kashmiri Pandit exodus happened. He says, no, we don't have a story on that. I say, what will happen if after 20 years, people want to look into your newspaper, and they say that, where was the exodus? And they look at your paper and there's no record of it. So he slightly explained to me, I could understand. He says, no, no, it was happening in bits and pieces. There was no big phenomenon like that. But I had gone to, I think, Nagrota camp that day, and I had reported, people had come there, and I had met people who were facing a second exodus. Some of the people in Uri and all, they were living. They had earlier also in 1947 and 65, they had faced the exodus. So they were saying, हमारा तो तीसरी बार exodus हो रहा है. So I was doing that story. I told him this is the condition. But a newspaper like Kashmir Times, largest circulation that time, they had not registered it. That was the kind of wishing away the problem, and it was prevailing all over. Government of India were just closing their eyes and saying, no, no, something will happen to them. Ye chale jayenge wapis. Then the civil society started, and it was after a long time that Gita Bhavan thing started, registration started, and that also thanks to Jagmohan and other people also. Some must be a few people it started. Government of India was not interested in doing anything. They wanted to wish away the problem. Till then, they were not even comprehending what is
The
going to
magnitude,
come to
the
Kashmir.
magnitude of the
Magnitude,
problem.
it had not hit them. It had not
They,
hit them.
they were just
While
wishing, yeah.
yes, while in Pakistan, I had an opportunity to visit Pakistan later. Then everything was planned. I
Mm.
saw all these terrorist organization. They had their, they had their what offices, very proper offices with security guards, and I was surprised. And what is their embassy doing there? And can't they give you all these reports? All the newspapers in Pakistan, they were carrying it as jihad and all that.
So tell me, let me stop you here. What year was it that you went to Pakistan, and why did you go to Pakistan?
Oh yeah, I went there in 2000,
Mm.
2000, yeah, 2000 exactly, and it was the wedding of Lone's son, who was the minister later. His
Sajjad
what's
Lone.
his name?
Sajjad.
Sajjad Lone. Sajjad Lone was getting
Sajjad Lone
married
was
to
getting married to
Amanullah
the
Khan's
founder of
daughter.
JKLF, Asma
Yes,
Asma Lone.
Asma Khan.
Mm.
So I went as a journalist to cover that, and he was kind enough to include me in his delegation. And then I saw it was a different. I mean, I was surprised. It was such a normal activity there. JKLF chief, what was his name? Yusuf? You, what's it? No, not JK. Sorry, I'm sorry. Hizbul Mujahideen chief. He comes in a car, in a Toyota. He has bodyguards. He has
Where was this in
two.
Pakistan? Was
It
this in
was in
Islamabad? Mm.
Islamabad and Rawalpindi.
Mm.
Part of it was in Rawalpindi, part of it was in Islamabad. So they were like VVIPs there. And it was, I mean, I would look at them and say, they would come, they had protocol, they had, pilot cars moving ahead of them. JKLF had an office. All these people whom we call terrorists, they had their offices. They were really, but they were under control of the government of Pakistan. And as they told me, I asked them, what do you do here? They say, no, we cannot go beyond Islamabad and this Rawalpindi and POK. Beyond that, we cannot go. There's a strict, kind of tab on us. We cannot go that. But it was a proper system they had created in
Yeah.
which all the terrorists were very, very VIPs, and here government of India didn't even know what they were up to. So Pakistan had really smartly managed everything, and the government of India had no clue to it. That was the reality of
It was
Kashmir,
under
and it was
General Zia. It was under General Zia that this started, and
they say
they started the
Topak,
training
Operation
camps,
Topak,
Operation Topak, and then
Topak.
generation the training camps, and of course they had it all planned, and we were caught unaware for sure. I want to go back to the terrorism in Valley for a minute. We've talked about Kashmiri Pandits and we've talked about Exodus. For a person who is not aware about it or who's watching from this whole thing from 1989 to 2022 just seems one big blur, one big story. But those who follow terrorism and those who follow and those who cover it like you do, you know that there were several ups and downs, and there have been several. There at one point there was one group that was in control, and then that moved. We know that initially it was JKLF. They were
JKL.
mostly Kashmir-based people who had gone for terror, gone
Training.
gone for that training that and they came back and they started. So the terrorism was in the hands of local people. At some point it was decided, I think Pakistan based decided, that these Kashmir based terrorists are no good. Even now they know that. I mean, they don't trust much. The commanders of Hizbul Mujahideen and Jaish and all these are always Pakistanis, because Punjabi, from that side, Punjabi
Yes,
Pakistanis
mostly,
or
mostly
Pashtuns,
Punjabi.
they don't trust Kashmiri terrorists, that they are good enough to be commanders. So then the reign of the terrorism passed on to Hizbul. And from Hizbul, of course, we saw LET and Jaish Muhammad and all that stuff. So tell me, how did you see this thing from moving from JKLF to Hizbul Mujahideen to other things? How did things change in the terrorism cadre? What were you recording at that time?
As you say, we started with JKLF. JKLF made a big news after abducting Rubiya Sayeed, and uh, but My understanding is that JKLF was a false flag operation. The ISI and all those people managing Kashmir terrorism, they were just testing the waters.
Ah.
They never liked JKLF. They never liked JKLF because there was something in JKLF which talked about J also, kind of Jammu, and it was seen as secular by their standards.
Mm. Although it
So
was never
it was
secular. Let's put it
it
on
was
record. It
never
was never
secular.
secular.
Yeah, that's true.
Yeah.
But from
From
Pakistan
their
angle,
standards.
Pakistan had looked at JKLF, but they made use of those boys to trigger something and test the waters, how prepared government of India is, and they knew how prepared or unprepared it is. But my understanding is, as I saw things unfolding, they had already prepared Hizbul Mujahideen. The concept behind Hizbul Mujahideen was Islam, Muslims, Muslim unity, and it is about Islam. And Kashmir was equated with Islam, and it was posed as a issue of Islam. Non-Islamic people don't have to rule Kashmir; it is our place. So the whole concept, and it started from, if you remember, Hizbul Mujahideen didn't start from a city; it started from villages. They had small villages. They would kill people. They will hang them on the
Yeah.
trees mostly. They would be called rassi walas, Razivoil, Kashmiri mein. They would be called Razivoil. And they started suddenly they had taken control of entire Kashmir part of it. JKLF was nowhere. There were few figureheads. I mean, Yasin Malik and I think three, four people. After that, there was nobody saw what happened to the JKLF. But Hizbul was a real one that was backed by ISI. It was the army that had been prepared, about which nobody knew. We were thinking only JKLF है, उनको 4-5 लोगों को अंदर डाल दिया, and फिर उनको whatever government of India did with them. Hizbul Mujahideen came with a plan. They blackmailed people into saying that if you don't join us, you are kafir. You are not being Islamic enough for us. So that way, that kind of made Kashmiri Muslims a cohesive force. That made Kashmiri Muslim give shelter to the terrorists, to give allow them to make hideouts in their homes. It created a network of support system for real terrorism to come. After that started, I think late mid 90s only, mid 1990 only, the Hizbul Mujahideen had started. And by the end of 1990, the Hizbul Mujahideen was fully in command of all the, I think, minus city. City, they were not much initially. But
Mm.
rural areas, they were fully in command. After that came Lashkar-e-Taiba. After that came a lot of people. I think at one, Allah Wale Koi Aaya. I think at one stage, there were some 50 terror organizations which were operating in Kashmir. But all were, of course, pro-Pakistan. But Hizbul Mujahideen, I think it was the main fodder for the ISI. And after that, it was very easy to arrest, kill, or neutralize the Kashmiri Muslims because they had not come with full conviction. Most of them would get arrested, they will speak out. They, as I told you initially, it was some kind of romance or some kind of social compulsion part of it. सब जा रहे हैं तो हम पीछे क्यों रह जाएं? That was the kind of thing. So not many of them had commitments. They'll be caught. So after that, Pakistan had to do something to carry it forward. Then
Mm.
came the Lashkar-e-Taiba, LET. Then came another thing. I think Huji was one
Mm.
organization that came.
And
Harkat-e-Jihad
Jason.
al-Islami, something like that.
Yeah. Yeah.
Jaish-e-Mohammed came. They were
Yeah.
deadly. They were mostly
Jaish was deadly.
former army men. Yes,
Mm.
it was deadly. And I remember this Lashkar-e-Taiba, when it came, they were in the upper reaches of Badgam. There they were fully lost. They were in Rajwar forest in Kupwara. They were in Doda's Wadwan area between. They were lodged there. They had territorial control on forest, not in. And they were then started the foreign militants coming. When foreign
Mm.
militants coming, Sopor, part of Sopor was under control, and it had to be kind of wrested from them because one bank of the river there, It was under control of some bhai. They call it Afghan, but I don't think he was Afghan. He must have been a Pashtun. A lot of
Pashtun.
people say Pashtuns for Afghan. So that had to be liberated by BSF. It was a big operation, and I have gone and seen that operation, how they were doing. We were invited by the BSF.
Mm.
Oh, those guys were deadly. They had no respect for anybody. They would kill people mercilessly, and but they were not successful because people were not with them. But they were deadly. Their striking capabilities were very high. And this Lashkar, since they were in Toshimadan and all, I think those higher reaches they were there. They would burn schools of women, girls' schools. They were all burnt. What happened?
Yeah.
As bhi jal
Very
gaya, kal bhi
Taliban
jal
like.
gaya, kya hua tha? They didn't like the
Taliban
women going to the school. Taliban type. They were
Taliban.
Taliban type. And I have met a lot of these people who were arrested, and they were like this Jaish-e-Mohammed chief today, who is UN proscribed terrorist,
Yeah.
Maulana Masood Azhar. I have met him.
Okay.
I
Tell us
have
about
met him,
that.
and I
Tell
remember
us
he
about
was.
that.
Yeah, he was arrested along with 2 3 other people, and army invited us. They said, come, there is some big catch, you come. So we went and talked to him, and he was saying, "मैं तो
This was
ताजिर हूँ,
where?
ताजिर हूँ."
This was where? What was the location of this interview? What was the location of this interview?
No, it was in the army cantonment. He has been arrested by an army by army or police, but he was brought to cantonment. I think army, and it was just he was going in an auto rickshaw. They found his movement suspect, and he was carrying some 2 passports, one Portuguese and one other passport. So that was suspicious, and he was arrested on basis of suspicion. Later, through intelligence, they must have come to know he's a big guy, and they called us. I remember we going and asking him, "Aap kaun hai?" And he was with a very straight face saying, "मैं तो ताजिर हूँ." So we asked, "What is tajir?" We were told tajir means he's a trader. So he would not say anything. Tajir हूँ, tajir हूँ. So I went back to my office and I said, "What am I going to write?" He kept saying tajir हूँ, tajir हूँ. Of course, we trust our army people, but they can also make a mistake, no? Ultimately, they have to get information. So
Mm.
there were very interesting things in Kashmir as a reporter I used. All these local people, many of them journalists or journalist linked people, they knew everything what is happening. It's a small society. So I just had to call a couple of people and ask them, what is happening? What is happening? And I asked about this. I say, oh, army has caught somebody, and is it? They're telling us it's some big catch. Who is he? So one fellow told me in the evening before I had to finalize. They say, Madam, there's a briefcase लेके आ रहे हैं उसको बचाने के लिए. He's a big shot. Very ordinary person is a big shot. एक briefcase लेके जो भी बता दो कोई है तो उसको दे देंगे. People want to rescue him. वो बहुत बड़ी चीज है. And he is a
Who
बड़ी
wanted
चीज.
to
Now we
rescue?
all know
Who
who he
wanted to
was.
rescue? Who wanted to rescue Maulana this thing?
No,
Masood?
what he was referring to, the Hurriyat and all.
They wanted
I
to
mean,
rescue.
they wanted to rescue him, and they say he told me, "Koi tajir wajir nahi hai. He's a big shot." Because these Hurriyat people have been going around saying, "Paisa le lo, हमको isko chhod do." Nobody will leave him. So,
Yeah.
but anyway, he managed to go back. That was the point. ऐसे बहुत सारे लोग पकड़े गए थे. I remember another fellow was some Langrial. He was also Lashkar Taiba. He was a former army man. And then then in Chari Sharif, when it was burnt, it was
Must
again Maskul. And later, through WikiLeaks, I came to know he was a former major of Pakistan Army.
he was.
See,
He
that was
indeed.
a kind of that is the kind of people Pakistan was sending to augment their local ranks and to boost their morale and also to keep them together.
Yeah.
It was not no longer in the hands of Kashmiris after this Hizbul Mujahideen had a good run. Then Pakistanis came and started controlling them. That
Yeah.
was the strength of militancy and also weakness, which ultimately proved because foreigners will not be liked by locals. I remember Mr. Abdul Ghani Lone telling me in 2000 that he said on record, he said everything is fine, but these foreigners coming into Kashmir to fight our battle is not acceptable. It will ruin us. And
No
he was
wonder he was
killed.
killed. No wonder he was
Yeah,
killed.
no wonder he was killed.
Yeah.
That's true.
Yeah, but at what you also say, the word you used was romanticized. You know, the local population romanticized this initially. In the initial stages, they romanticized. Um, I don't know if they romanticized or they were actually looking forward to Azadi. Because if you remember, Azadi was the main slogan. Hum kya chahte hain? Azadi.
Ha
So
ha,
I think
true.
the local population, whether they were actually picking the guns, some of them, not everyone picks the guns. In a terrorism thing, when we look at the conflict zone, very few pick up the guns. If you look at the
Yeah,
population and if you look at
true.
the proportion, so it will be like maybe 0.5% or 1% of the population will pick up guns. Not everyone can be a trained,
True.
fighter. But how does terrorism succeed? Terrorism only succeeds when it is, as you said, embedded in the urban areas, in the local areas, when the local people are actually providing them information, giving them cover, and not sort of giving them, allowing them to exist between themselves. So that was happening. That I have seen with my own eyes, that they may have resisted foreign mujahideen and all that, the Pashtun mujahideen and all those, they came, but initially they let it go because they thought Azadi is around the corner. Indian state has capitulated. Azadi aane wali hai, and this is all going to. And if Kashmiri Pandits become, collateral damage in this, no big deal, because then, that's why, in the sense that even by not doing anything, they were also aiding in the genocide of Kashmiri Pandits that was, that sort of happened. So there is also that local support, which had been in the beginning, then maybe it evaporated for a little while, but I see it happening all over again now. The local support has increased. What do you think about that?
You're right. You know, the militancy cannot exist without the local network, logistical support. It cannot exist without that. It had happened. Um, and you're right that it's only handful of people who pick up the arms, and at least they are seen carrying arms, and they are direct. They can be identified.
Yeah.
But the most dangerous part is the embedded terrorists who at that time were government officials. The government was highly compromised. Police to some extent was compromised. Education was totally compromised. Even a place like Skims, Sher Kashmir Medical Institute, I'm told there on the pay day, the day salary will be paid, there'll be a JKLF guy, there'll be Hizbul Mujahideen guy sitting there and taking their share of, hissa de do hamara, donation de do. It was open. He would be at the counter. Nobody had the guts to resist it. There was local support, and I can, I have seen people there. They were struggling with things. Say there is a village, a small village, where terrorist comes and he wants shelter. People cannot refuse him. But in the urban areas, what happened? Government of India somehow gave some signals that it's okay. We are liberal. You do what you want to do. So the people got a hint that helping terrorists is not a problem. You know,
So you'd say that government of India was all, and I've said this before and I've said it multiple times. I think it has only
they
changed
gave.
after 2019. Government of India, we talk about leaders in Kashmir, they talk in four tongue, they talk in multiple voices. But government of India was also speaking in multiple voices. They were also giving mixed signals for a long time.
They were not clear what they want. I'll give you an example. For example, All India Radio and Doordarshan, they had very tough time. They were embedded people. There were threats to people. They'll be told not to mention. You write militants, don't write terrorists.
Mm.
I mean, they were told to moderate their stand. So, what does for example, JKLF guy, this Yasin Malik, he'll be roaming around freely. He'll go and attend peace conferences. So, what is that signal? The common man in Kashmir thinks that, oh, this is okay. I mean, he's a VIP, and I think I should be like him. If I be normal and don't support him, then I'm going to lose the game. So
Mm.
these kind of mixed signals, wrong signals, I'll say, that the government of India gave in Kashmir, even allowing them processions, anti-India processions. And Doordarshan was told you have to cover it, and Doordarshan covered it. Our Mr. Lassa call, he covered it, and even then he got killed.
Killed.
So these kind of mixed, I would say, wrong signals that were given to people, that it's okay, we are ready to some extent to accommodate these kind of feelings. We are not tough with guys who become terrorists or to support them. Thoda problem hoga. It's not a big problem. That kind of, it just fire the imagination or force people, who are, see, silent majority is always peaceful. They are
Mm.
not with them. Azadi, yes, it was a concept. But if you, when we ask people आजादी क्या है, ये तो यूएन में लिखा नहीं है आजादी, उधर तो या तो पाकिस्तान जाना है या इंडिया जाना है, they had no answer. It was a utopian azadi, because the concept of azadi was not there. So I would again blame, I'm not into blame game, but I have seen
Mm.
it with my own eyes how the common man in Kashmir was misled into believing Pakistan first, fed them with a lot of guns, ammunition, everything, trained their boys into militancy. Then government of India told them, well, it is happening, so it's okay to be, we don't like it, but then we can let it go. So
Mm.
people, ordinary people thought, oh, we are going to miss something. Kal ko kuch hoga, we should not be left out. So there I will blame government of India, and common people. They ultimately have to save their skin. And Sunanda, it was so bad in mid 90s. I remember I had a politician friend who was from National Conference. He'll tell us, he would sometime meet us in a place, and he'll tell us, when I used to move out from my house, the people would thoko me salam. They'll say salam saab, adab. He says, Abhi, I have to bow my head and pass. Nobody should see me. Now the local section commander of Hizbul Mujahideen, he is the boss of the street.
Mm.
He is honored. He is, everybody gets up and says, Salam alaikum, aye, chai pije, aye, hookah pije. He said that is the situation. So that also happened. We cannot say everybody provided them
Mm.
logistics or happily provided them. Of course, later Pakistan used to spend a lot of money. Even now, when there these foreigners come, they pay a very big amount of money. Now they are very organized, they're logistical, jitna bhi hai unka. But that time people were forced into supporting or being seen as supporting these terrorists, thinking, A, of course, Azadi is some utopian idea, it will come. And secondly, thinking this is the right way, this is the way you become Yasin Maliks, you're invited to the parties and you're invited to speak on the mic. It's a
Yeah.
big thing, no? It's a big
Indian
thing.
government also at that time was responsible for glorifying terrorists.
Glorifying
Yeah,
terrorism. They couldn't
showed they
decide.
were
Like
responsible.
today, there is a lot of clarity. There is a
Yeah.
lot of clarity. I tell you, there were officers. I remember this SOG, Special Operation Group, when it was made. It was made by, created by some uh, policemen, who said, "What is this? Terrorists are killing us, and we are sitting there." I think Farooq Khan, who is advisor now to Lieutenant Governor, he started this. He told me that I was frustrated. They are
Mm.
coming and killing us, and we are doing nothing. I wanted to quit the force. I told, he told somebody whosoever was in charge, I think Girish Saxena, that we need to fight them. They say, how will you fight? No harm. He said, but we will fight them.
Yeah.
And that is how SOG came into being. It was formed. The local police, hats off to the local police. I am a big admirer of Jammu and Kashmir police. As we all see, they used to be called Pond police, because they were basically what, tourist management, tourism management, traffic management. It was not a big a place where crime used to happen, murder or something used to happen. Very rarely. The serious crime was very rare before terrorism came. But over the years, uh, their will to fight terrorists and their will to change, it is hats off to them. I mean, I've never seen, and they have lost so many people, mm, like BSF, CRPF, everybody has lost, but JKLF has also lost. So when
JK
we,
police. You mean JK police?
Jammu and Kashmir police, yes, I'm talking of JNK police. Their transformation, they took up, they decided to fight the terrorists,
Yeah.
and now they're totally in command of the situation. Their transformation was amazing. So we cannot say that all sections of Kashmiri Muslim society, they were coded down by the terrorism. Government of India made certain, gave wrong signals. Because of that, majority of the people wanted to be seen on the side of terrorists up to a certain time. Now you go, things have changed because there's a signal from Delhi. Aisa nahi chalega. They are serious about. They have defined who's terrorist, what should be done to terrorist property, how a terrorist has to be neutralized, or how he has to be brought back. So there is a clarity in the policy of the government of India. That time there was no policy. If there was policy, there was no clarity. Everybody looked the other way when it came to taking decisions. It was very, very bad, very, very bad management. But the turnaround, if you want me to speak on that,
Yes,
the
please, please.
first, yeah, the first turnaround came during Narasimha Rao's time.
Mm.
He was a man who we all of us thought that ye kya karega, he's a sleepy person, he's not that flamboyant kind of a person. But honestly, even on Kashmir, I was in Kashmir that time. What they started bringing foreign ambassadors, groups of ambassadors to Kashmir. Somewhere government of India, somebody told government of India, you have nothing to hide. We are fighting a bad war. It's a terrorism. It's a proxy war. So might as well show it to the people. So the groups of these ambassadors started coming to Kashmir. I attended one or two briefing of theirs. I was with them, tagged on to them. They went to BSF, they went to Army Cantonment, they went to Girish Chandra Saxena, who was the governor then. They got briefing and they were asking very hard hitting questions. I remember I was present in Army briefing when Army was briefing them. And they were this, I think, some Jordanian or some Middle East countries ambassador. He was asking very pointed questions. He wanted to know whether there are these people who are speaking are actually Muslims. He asked them about which is this surah of Quran. What tell me this chapter of Quran? What is it on? He was testing them. Uh, he, and that changed the environment globally. People started slightly understanding that India is fighting a difficult war, and with that, gradually, a policy started coming into shape thanks to Narasimha Rao government.
Mm.
And government of India also became little bold because till then government of India was always scared. Log kya kahenge? I mean, dunya ke log kya kahenge? Everything had to be kept under wrap. Everything. I mean, people made mistakes when you are having. I'll tell you, those days we used to get at the end of the day we used to get a strip from the this control room, police control room. It listed all the encounters that happened on one day. You won't believe, at least 20, there used to be two sides of a page printed, which means 10 to 20 encounters were happening all over Kashmir on a given day. It's not a joke.
Yeah.
If you falter in one, maybe on two also, I think that is, I'm not saying that's a good thing, but that is the possibility. One can falter. There can be a casualty of civilian also. That was happening. But instead of accepting it as a mistake and rectifying it or refining your processes, government of India wanted to keep under wrap. Nahi, kuch nahi hua. Bahar pata nahi chalna chahiye. We'll get a bad name. But Narasimha Rao started changing that. His pace was slow, but nevertheless, hats off to him. We must credit him for at least starting a kind of policy on Kashmir.
Yeah. Having some, at least some vision that we need
Yes,
to get
some
Kashmir
way.
back and we need to earn. But you also will remember that that's why governments in center, they need to be stable. That was the first five
Yeah.
stable government, even though it was a minority government, but it was stable and it stayed for 5 years. Before that, we were changing prime ministers every year and a
No,
half.
terrible,
So it was
terrible.
a very bad period. I mean, if you see the time Kashmir terrorism, it started, and what was going on in Indian polity, it couldn't have come at a worse time. But I think Pakistan was watching Indian politics, and they knew
Certainly,
exactly what time to attack, because right after this 80s, late 80s, and once this till Narsimha Rao, there were, what was we were going through? Devi Gowda and Inder Kumar
oh
Gujral,
my God.
Shekhar, and what policy could we really have? I mean, sometimes I think it's a miracle that we survived. It's
I
truly
can tell
a
you a joke.
miracle that we
I can
survived.
tell you a joke about it.
Go ahead.
Devagowda, as Prime Minister, had come to Kashmir, and somebody among us, I mean
Which
journalists,
prime minister is
asked him,
this? Which prime minister had come to Kashmir?
Devagowda, H.D.
Devi Gowda.
Devagowda. He
Mm.
came to Kashmir, I'm sure he didn't know what he's talking about. Some journalist asked him a question. He said, what are you going to do about Kashmir? Oh, we will open this road, logistic. We'll open that road. We'll make it Jannat and things like that. Was fine. Somebody very mischievously asked, oh, wo Pindi road ka kya karoge? He had no clue what Pindi road is. He was talking of Srinagar, Rawalpindi. He said, sir, wo Pindi road. He said, kaun sa road? Bola, Pindi road. He said, wo bhi khol denge. And Farooq Abdullah was there that time. I remember we all were looking here and there. Prime Minister saying we'll reopen Pindi Road, and we didn't know what to do because he didn't know what Pindi Road was. That was no connection with Kashmir.
So
It
this
was that
really
kind of government.
shows, what we were, I'm telling you, it's a miracle that Kashmir survived, and it's a miracle that
Yes,
India survived.
yes,
We
certainly,
survived
certainly.
that time. Then, of course,
That's
Narasimha Rao and then Vajpayee, of course, by the time Vajpayee came, things were much more in control.
much
And
more.
then the government, I mean, 1990, by 1996, we started having the elections again, and ups and downs, but at least Indian government was in control. We've reached almost to the end of it. My phone is buzzing. I have questions from people. I want to ask you those questions, but I have one
Sure.
question. I have read your op-ed in the Hindu that you wrote
Oh.
many years ago. I won't go into the details of that. It's for people to read if they want to. But I just want to read, since you made it public, it was in op-ed. I want to ask you about what is the story of that Hizbul Mujahideen splitting.
Oh, yeah, yeah,
You
yeah.
made it public. I want
Oh,
to ask you because
yes, yes,
I
yes.
have been following terrorism. I've been studying terrorism and following terrorism. I never knew about Hizbul Mujahideen splitting. Did it ever split? What was that story?
Yes. Yes, I think it was in 90. Hizbul Mujahideen had split. And it seems Hizbul Mujahideen had given a handout to all the local newspapers. They wouldn't give it to us. But locally, we had coordination with locals. So they gave it out that I think Asan Dar was the chief then. He was accused of taking all the money. It split over money. Jhagda ho gaya, paisa le gaya wo. And he was imprisoned somewhere. One of his cronies, I think, they contacted us on phone. Those days we didn't have mobile phones. On our landline, they contacted us, and I picked up the phone. He says, "Is your husband there?" My husband is also a journalist. I say yes. So they say, "आप सच लिखते हो? आप लोग लिखिए that this has happened. Asandar has been imprisoned, and Hizbul Mujahideen is split. He has been thrown out from the Hizb." So we said, okay. My husband said, give us the handout. They say, handout has been issued, but the call came from Pakistan that this should not get published because it is not in the interest of the Tehreek. So after that, phone call went to everybody, all the offices, local newspaper, that it should not get published, and it was not published. We said, give us that press note. So they put in our letterbox. We had my husband, he was working with Indian Express, I was with Tribune. So they put in the Indian Express letterbox, and we got it. And we did the story.
The story
I
went
mean,
out.
this story, yeah, Hizbul Mujahideen is split, and the split is over money. It's not about ideology, it's about money. And it is split. And that was one of the biggest turning points in Kashmir's terrorism also. It would have gone unreported. Maybe Pakistan would have worked some patch up between the two factions or whatever. It would have been under wraps. So we wrote about the story. I wrote in Tribune, my husband wrote in Indian Express. And next day, while we flew to Jammu because my grandmother had died, in the evening somebody came to our house. I think police had sent, called my husband, told them there is a big story. Hizbul Mujahideen wants both of you to be out of Kashmir within 48 hours because you have done this. So anyway, we went back, and we did. It was our job to report it, but they didn't want to be out. It was a secret. It
Wow.
was the honor which was violated, and we wrote. After that, they issued a threat to us. They said within 48 hours you go back. Anyway, we didn't go back. We were there, but it was tough. After that, life was very, very difficult for us.
It also
And
shows what I was said in the beginning, that in conflict zones, you don't know who is playing who. Journalists will never know. There are these games that are being played all the time. Journalism is a tough job. I mean, people may or may not, the profession has become maligned so much in current times. But if you really do true journalism, it's a tough job because what is the truth? You have to unearth the truth, and it is very difficult. And journalism is the first draft of history, but historians have a ability. They can look back. They have 2020. Hindsight is always 2020. But when you are in the thick of things, you have very short time to decipher what is going on, and everybody is playing games in conflict zones, especially because there's a lot of propaganda. Propaganda is a very effective tool that is used by all parties, and now this journalist is getting caught between this propaganda war. So I think you got caught between two factions of Hizbul Mujahideen, but we got a fabulous story out of it. So
Yes,
thank
true.
you
That
for
is what,
that. Yeah, that
as
is,
a journalist.
as a journalist, that is a fabulous moment, I mean, for you. One last question, and then I will go to the thing, because it's a question that is very dear to my heart. I often get asked that you're a Kashmiri Pandit yourself. How can you maintain objectivity about the stories that you write about Kashmir? And I tell them that, as you know, we are trained to look at things objectively, and it takes a little bit of training, but then that's how it is. But there are times, I know, when it is very difficult to not know, to not take into account what has happened to your family, what has happened to people around you, what has happened to your people, the seven exoduses or the genocide that has been continuing from 13th century onwards, I mean 14th century onwards. I mean, how do you take that may not be a memory there, but it's a civilizational memory. How can you take that out of your DNA and do very? We all try very hard. I know you do too. So, what has been your experience about being very objective when you report about your own people?
No, actually, when you are like, I was posted in Srinagar, I was covering Kashmir. So, what happened to us, or had been happening to us, it is a generational memory. We all are suffering because of that. We so much has happened in our lives because of that. Maybe my personal family was not directly affected. We were living in Jammu, but our entire extended family came there. We couldn't go to our matamal. We couldn't go to our home again. So everybody was affected in that sense. But as a professional, I think we are trained, and if you have integrity, if you have trust in yourself, and you believe in that you are doing a task, it's a job, you have to report things to the wider world, you will try to do a good job of it. I was living in Kashmir, and I have done so many stories of the suffering of Kashmiri women. I have done stories about, because I could see them, I could understand that these women, they have no say in what is happening in Kashmir. For example, the terrorists had asked all the government offices not to go for what do you say, family planning operations, tubectomy, hysterectomy. Don't do that. And the government had
इस्लाम के
stopped
खिलाफ
everything.
है, इस्लाम के
हाँ,
खिलाफ है.
Islam ke khilaf, and they had stopped it. And I was caught by a lady. It was some army function. She came to me and spoke to me in Kashmiri. "Oh, इनको बोल दो हमारा operation कर दे. I have 5 children. I have no means of livelihood." You just so you will write these stories when you meet real people. You will write real stories. Of course, that doesn't mean when I have written stories on Kashmiri Pandits also, but
Mhm.
not as much, honestly, because it was happening in summer. I was not in Jammu, but
Mhm.
when I wrote Dil Se Unke Liye Bhi, but mostly I was based in Srinagar, Kashmir. I wrote a lot of stories about Kashmiri. Okay. You don't have to kind of justify one atrocity with another atrocity. Human suffering is universal. If a person whom you see suffering, you have to write about that. That is our training as a journalist. I'm sure you'll agree with me.
Yeah, I
That's our
do.
training.
I do.
And
I
we
do.
have to be objective about it. Otherwise, we are not true to our salt,
Yeah.
actually.
In reporting, at least you have to be
Yes,
objective,
you have to
and
be
then of course
objective.
when you are doing analysis, and
Yeah,
for
then you
I
can.
have since moved into the field of analysis, so I'm able to do. I'm able to look at a larger picture and this thing. So I do, but reporting, there has to be a difference between first page of the newspaper and the opinion page. So I agree with you there. I have a few questions that have come to me. This question says, why do you think the Indian state was brushing the issue under the carpet repeatedly? Because you were saying that they wanted to wish away the thing. Um, why were they brushing the issue under carpet? And because of that, they even the makeshift transit camps, which were made in the remotest area of Jammu and Udhampur on deserted lands, where they were they fearful that this might become a bigger issue to handle if they recognized it? Were they in a way hiding the existence of the whole community? They didn't want the suffering of Kashmiri Pandits to come at all, because even those transit camps and those camps that were made, they were pathetic. So many people died of snake bites,
Snake
and
bites.
yeah, it was pathetic. Why did they just want these people to disappear?
No, actually, government of India at that time, as we said, it was weak, but also it was
That's okay. That's okay.
sorry.
Don't
There
worry
was
about
some
it.
other.
Don't worry about it. That's okay. You just got photobombed. That's okay. Millennials understand.
Yeah, she wanted a
Go ahead.
charger.
That's all right. Go
And
ahead.
our institutions were not that strong that time. Our
Yeah.
institutional, they were not strong that time, and leadership was very weak. There was no, as Sunanda rightly pointed out, there was no political stability in the center. So they didn't want to take up issues which they wanted to avoid. They were not bold enough to accept that things are happening. And only first thing to solve a problem is you acknowledge a problem. So the government of India didn't want to acknowledge the problem. And about Kashmiri Pandits, honestly, when Kashmiri Pandits left Srinagar in January, the exodus started in January 26, around 26. Everybody thought we'll come back, isn't it?
Yeah.
Everybody
Yeah.
thought
Everybody
we
thought
will
it was
find.
temporary.
Everybody thought,
Every
and government of India also thought they'll go back.
yeah.
It never occurred to it that. And also, another factor is there which today's generation should understand. Right, government was not good, that's fine, but there was no social media that time. You know, the impact of social media today, ek choti si baat, it becomes a big thing. Everybody, acknowledges it. Back then, it was not so. It was being seen as cluster of things happening. Oh, aaj Kupada se ek bus aaya. Oh, somebody came, and people moved individually.
Yeah.
It was not a big exodus happening, per se, that people are coming in hordes. Everybody came individually. In some cases, their Muslim neighbors helped them. My own mama, I remember his Muslim neighbors, they helped them. They put them in the truck, and he didn't take any money. In fact, he gave him some money. He says, I'm throwing you on the road. So I'm not accepting your money from you. He gave him some 2,000-3,000 rupees token money. You keep it. When you are fine, you give it back to me. That happened. So government of India also thought that nahi, ye kya hai? They'll go to their relatives. Anyway, they come also during winter. A big chunk of Kashmiri Pandits used to go to
Yeah.
Jammu. So they thought they will go away, and they didn't acknowledge their presence initially. It was much later, I think somewhere in March or something.
Something that they realized that they had a problem at their
Yeah,
hand.
they have a problem, and that also because Jagmohan was there.
Yeah.
He said no, something has to be done to them. There's a humanitarian crisis here.
Yeah. I have another question. They say we have seen that after a gap of almost 17 years, Kashmir has started seeing selective killings of Kashmiri Pandits, including other Hindus from rest of India. Now you see laborers and some people from Jammu have been shot dead. This time, the killings have had those who didn't flee. In fact, this is the first time that they're also killing
Yes,
people who never fled.
yes.
And those who went back under the employment packages, as Rahul Bhatt, you would remember.
Yes,
So,
yes.
do you feel no policy vis-a-vis Kashmiri Pandits can succeed unless those in power don't see this as a genocide and take comprehensive measures to punish and prevent it and build a strong foothold within Kashmir for Kashmiri Pandits instead of experimenting, without comprehension. So his question is, this person's question is that, everything is just a stopgap arrangement, these employment packages and these things. You cannot, if this is a genocide, then it must be treated as a genocide, and genocide cannot be treated as a law and order issue. You cannot just say that, okay, now, today there have not been many casualties, or you cannot measure it in terms of casualties, or you cannot measure in terms of terrorist attacks. So, if this community has gone through genocide, repeated genocide, a continual genocide, and now this is the seventh exodus, do you think Indian government should start looking differently at solving this problem now?
Well, ideally they should look, but I think the present government has a long-term plan about Kashmir. Right now, Kashmiri Pandits do not fit into the scheme of things because
Mm.
of our numbers and because of their policies. See, they I'm sure they will have some place for Kashmiri Pandit, but right now, no, there's no concrete policy. And can there be any policy if somebody is posted to Srinagar, or I mean Kashmir, any part, Chadura, like that fellow that was killed in Chadura?
Mm.
It's a remote place. It's a village. How much protection you can give to
Yeah,
an individual
targeted
in a,
killings cannot be stopped.
it cannot be stopped. So, well, it's a difficult question. I don't know what government of India can do about it, but accepting genocide, again, on genocide they bring up all those definitions of United Nations and all. This is not genocide. Whatever it is something, a humanitarian crisis. It is a violation of my right to not live in. I am not being allowed to live peacefully in my land. It's a violation of human rights. But
Yeah,
since numerically we are not, we don't matter for them. You
yeah.
know, it is, the politics is all about numbers. Jiska
Yeah.
number zyada hota hai, vote as vote bank. Whosoever is a bigger vote bank, they get preference on things. But government of India, right, the government today they are working on some plan. Nobody is privy to that. There, I think what I can sense is they want Kashmir to become prosperous, so that there is less of social tension, and possibly Kashmiri Pandits can go back and live as normal beings.
Mm.
Also, government of India is depending a lot on opening of road and railways.
Mm.
Road connectivity and railways will become a big link.
Mm.
Right now, honestly, my dear friend, Kashmiri Pandits are not their priority. Let's admit it.
Yeah.
अगर कुछ करना है तो community itself has to do something. Maybe they can buy a piece of land and make a smart city or do something like that. That
Yeah.
those cooperative efforts will pay. Government of India will not be helpful in this situation where they have a bigger problem at hand. Pakistan controlling Kashmir, making Kashmir prosperous. But if
Mm.
Kashmir becomes prosperous and Kashmiri Pandits can have their space, who knows, that also may be a good idea. But
Mhm.
what I like about this government is they have a plan of action.
Okay.
They are not kind of fighting in the air. They have a plan of action. It may go right, it may not go right. I hope it goes the right way, but they are working on something, and
Yeah.
which is very open, transparent development in a big way.
Mm.
And de-radicalization is another problem. They are trying to deal at some level. I
Yeah.
am privy to a lot of activities of de-radicalization,
Yeah.
because if minds are cleansed of, somebody is a kafir and somebody is a Momin, I think a lot of problems will be solved because of that. It's going to take time. It's not very easy.
It's not easy at all. Yeah. On that note, also there is, I hope the government of India has been presented a genocide atrocities bill by the organization Panun Kashmir, and
Yes,
in that they have been that bill is in public domain. I'm not sure if you've read it or not, but
I have not read, but I know
if you
about it.
haven't, it's a good bill, and I think government of India should sort of consider it and maybe start a debate about it. And I think at some point, debate about the strategic foothold for Kashmiri Pandits in Kashmir, where the administrative control is also in the hands of nationalist forces. The lower judiciary and the lower bureaucracy and all that control is in the hands of nationalist forces. Strategic foothold like that, if that is, it can be called Kashmir. And if that is created, then maybe, the rehabilitation of Kashmiri Pandits will happen. But I understand that this is a long process. First, they have to stabilize Kashmir. The amount of mistakes that have been made, and Kashmir is a story of litany of mistakes that have been made in the era of 90s when you were covering it. Much later, of course, as you said, the Indian government found its feet, and now we are fighting back. So it is going to take as much time to get back and get the situation under control. But we must understand that long before West was dealing with Islamist terrorism, State of India, Indian state was fighting terrorism in Kashmir. Kashmir is the first jihadist laboratory of the world, as I call it. And this is where if Kashmir fails, the world fails. So nobody can allow Kashmir to fail. On that note, thank you so much, Asha ji. This has been such a wonderful conversation. I hope to carry it forward. And also, I also hope that we see your memoir pretty soon. That a lot of people need to know these stories. We've only covered a very small fraction of it. I mean, we only have that much time. But yes, we look forward to your memoir. And thank you so much for your service. Thank you so much for bravely and courageously. One knows the kind of attack, the kind of fear and the kind of things that are associated with covering journalism and stories in conflict areas. So thank you for your service. Thank you for everything you've done. And with that, we conclude this episode of Epicenter. Keep watching. Last episodes, I received tons of messages that all of you have sent me about that episode with Vikram Sood. And we're going to bring you more of such conversations, eye-openers, elephant in the room conversations, as I call them. Do subscribe to Epilogue's handle on Twitter, on Facebook, and on Instagram, because that is where you will know about the new guests who are coming. So be well, keep reading, send us your feedback, and I'll be here next week. Thank you so much. This is Sunanda Vashisht signing off.